Hey guys, today we're going to be looking at putting ratios in lowest terms. You can see here that we have a few ratios that show striped squares to white squares. And if we look at these, we could see that they have the same values. Equivalent ratios use different numbers, but they show the same value. And you can see that the area that's striped in all of these is the same. So if we look at the first set of boxes, and we want to rate the ratio of striped boxes to all boxes in this group, we'd say that the ratio is 4 to 8. If we look at the same value over here, we can see that the ratio of striped boxes to all boxes is 2 to 4. And here in this last one, we can see that the ratio of striped to all is 1 to 2. Now this is the smallest numbers we would be able to use to show this value. And so we'd say that this is written in lowest terms when we say 1 to 2. Next we could look at the same boxes, but look at the ratio now instead of striped to all as the striped boxes to the white boxes. In this case, we'd then say the ratio is 4 to 4. And of course this one here would be 2 to 2. And then any time that you have both terms being equal, your lowest terms would always be 1 to 1. So lowest terms is the smallest numbers you can use to show a ratio's value. You're going to want to fill these notes in. If you need to, at the end of this page, you can stop the video to get everything written in. Remember that you can multiply or divide a ratio by any number you want, as long as you do the same thing to both terms. Now dividing is just a little bit trickier, because you cannot just pick any number you want. You have to find a number that will divide both the top and the bottom evenly. We call this number a common factor. You may remember from fractions that if you find the greatest common factor, it'll save you some steps. To put a ratio in lowest terms, there's 3 steps we need to do. Number 1, we need to find the greatest common factor. Number 2, we need to divide the top and the bottom by the greatest common factor. If the ratio is written horizontally, then we divide the first and the second term both by the greatest common factor. And then last, we need to check to make sure it's in lowest terms. If we divide it by the greatest common factor, it will be in lowest terms. But if we found a common factor that wasn't the biggest one, we may have a little bit of work to do still. So let's look at 16 to 24 as our ratio and go through the steps of putting it in lowest terms. So step 1 is to find the greatest common factor. We're going to look at 2 ways to do that. First of all, we're going to look at making factor lists. So we could make factor lists for both 16 and 24. So I'm going to put 16 and 24 down here, and then we'll list all the factors for each one, and then we'll look for common factors. So 16, we always start with 1 and the number itself. So we have 1 and 16. Then it's even, so I know that 2 will also be a factor. 2 times 8 would make 16. Now 3 won't work, but 4 will. And in fact, 4 times 4 is 16. So that means my factor list is finished. Now let's look at the factors for 24. 1 and 24, of course. And then I look and it's an even number 2. So I know that 2 will work. 2 times 12 would give me 24, so I'll put 2 here and 12 over here. 3 also works. 3 times 8 would give me 24. Then I'll try 4. Yep, 4 will work. And its factor pair would be 6. Now 5 won't work, and so that means I'm finished. It's a lot of factors for 24. Now we can take a look. We can see that 1 is on both lists, 2 is on both lists, 3 is down here but not up here, 4 appears on both lists, 6 is only on one, but I see 8 on both. 16's up here but not here, 12's not up here, and 24's not up here. So that tells me that 8 is the greatest common factor. So by making factor lists, I can accomplish step 1, which is find the greatest common factor. Before we move on to step 2, I'm just going to show you one other way you could find the greatest common factor. I could use a multiplication chart instead of making factor lists if I want. I'm going to look for lists in which both 16 and 24 appear. So I've pulled these lists off of the multiplication chart because they happen to contain both numbers. So here I can see that 16 and 24 both appear on the 2's list. That shows me that 2 is a common factor. I also see 16 and 24 right here on the 4's list. You'll notice we already saw that those were common factors as well. And then I can also find 16 and 24 on the 8's list. And you'll notice that they're right next to each other. If I find them right next to each other on the multiplication chart, I know that that will be the biggest number that could divide them both. So since I found 16 and 24 on this list, I go over and see which number it is that would divide them. I can see they're on the 8 list, so 8 would be my greatest common factor. So both cases, 8's found to be the greatest common factor. You can use whichever of these methods you like the best to determine what's the greatest common factor. Let's take a look now at step 2. Now that we've found the greatest common factor of 8, we're going to divide both the top and the bottom, or the first and second terms, by the greatest common factor. So 8's the greatest common factor. We're going to divide the top by 8, and we're going to divide the bottom by 8. 16 divided by 8. I can use my multiplication chart. 8 will go into 16 2 times. And 8 will go into 24 3 times. So 2 to 3, I've reduced my original ratio to, and now we can go on to step 3. Step 3 is just to check that we're in lowest terms. There's a few ways that I could check to make sure I'm in lowest terms. The first way is, if I have a 1 on top of my ratio, I know it's in lowest terms. That's not the case here, so let's keep checking. Another way to tell that I'm in lowest terms for sure is that if there's only a gap of 1 between my first and second term, I would know I'm in lowest terms. There's only a gap of 1 here between 2 and 3, so that tells me for sure this is in lowest terms. If that wasn't the case, though, I'd go on to check that there's no more common factors between the top and bottom number. That means I wouldn't be able to divide both these numbers by one single number. So since we've determined that this is in lowest terms, in this case because the gap is 1, we'll circle this as our ratio written in lowest terms. 16 to 24 can be written in lowest terms as 2 to 3. Make sure you've copied the factor lists and circled these numbers to show your work so that if you look back you can see both ways of finding the greatest common factor. Make sure you've also showed that we divided by 8 here, and make sure you circle 2 to 3 as our lowest terms answer. You can pause the video if you need to give yourself time to fill this in now.